Today, we're going to be talking about something that is pretty exciting to me, at least. I'm very fascinated in this topic, and that is the history and the invention of the microphone. So, obviously, we're going to go back to who the first person that patented a microphone was, and that is Alexander Graham Bell, which he patented his first microphone in 1876. His microphone consisted of a wire which conducted electrical current, electrical direct current, so DC. Audio signals were generated and received by a moving armature transmitter and its receiver, and the transmission was possible from both directions. And as you can see, as I'm putting up a picture here of it, you can see it's kind of funky looking. Quite different than the microphones we use today, but there are some similarities, as you will see as well. But definitely a different looking microphone than maybe what we're all used to. In 1877, Emily Berliner filed a patent for a microphone, the carbon microphone. Alexander Bell, who only a year before this had invented the telephone, recognized the practical importance of the Berliner's technology, so he bought the patent for $50,000, which during this time would have been a huge sum of money, quite a bit of money. So he was loaded, as they say. Building on Bell's initial moving armature design, Francis Blake patented a design that used a platinum bead impressed against a hard carbon disc as a variable resistance element. Blake's device fell short of the initial desired frequency range, but the standard of Bell's telephone system for years because of its efficiency in modeling the telephone signals. So, after Francis Blake's invention using the platinum bead, Blake then developed a microphone transmitter that was used loose granule elements. This early microphone design was the precursor to the most widely used microphone type from its invention to the present day, the carbon microphone. Later, in 1886, Thomas Edison, right now we're with Thomas Edison, now working to improve the Bell telephone microphone, aka Emily Berliner's carbon microphone mentioned above, found a way to do so. He found that the carbon worked better if roasted. That's interesting. So they roasted the carbon. This, combined with a few structural improvements, produced what is known as the carbon button microphone. The carbon button microphone. Quite the name. This improved type of carbon mic would ultimately be used in all Bell telephones until the 1980s. So that was quite the invention if they used it that long. All right, moving on. It's going to be a little bit of a jump because we went from 1886. Now we're jumping to 1904. In 1904, Sir John Ambrose Fleming, an English electrical engineer and physicist, invented the first tube vacuum. Interesting, a tube vacuum. By the 1920s, vacuum tubes became widely used in technology and were starting to be experimented with in the world of microphones. Lee D. Forrest in 1905 invented the first trioid vacuum tube, the basic tube used in microphones. The patent was awarded in 1906. We're going to have another jump here again. In 1916, Edward Christopher Wente, an American physicist, invented the first ever condenser microphone while working at Western Electric. Now we're getting to the microphones that we're all a little bit more familiar with, a condenser microphone. Like its predecessor, the carbon microphone. The condenser microphone utilized two plates. However, the condenser microphone did not include any carbon granules and rather had an empty space between the plates. The two plates of the condenser microphone formed a capacitor, then referred to as a condenser, hence the name. A consistent voltage was applied across the plate to hold a fixed charge. And then it goes on to say, had been done with a carbon microphone. One of the plates was very thin and acted as a diaphragm, moving in symphony with the second wave that it hit. The other plate, the back plate, was thicker and stationary. As the diaphragm moved, the distance between the plates changed, which altered the capacity in the parallel plate capacitor. By maintaining a fixed charge across the plates, any charge would cause an inversely proportional change in voltage. Therefore, the moving diaphragm caused a conducting AC voltage, a mic signal, to be outputted from the mic. So now, as explained earlier, they were using DC type of electrical currents, which was very different back in the days. And now they're using AC, which, that's kind of where the name AC/DC comes from, is electrical direct current and alternating current. Moving on from that, now we jump to 1917. The invention of the piezoelectric electric. I can never say this correct, but piezoelectric. There it is. Piezoelectric microphone actually came out in a strange way. In 1917, Paul Langevin, the French physicist, was the first person to use a piezoelectric crystals to detect sound. Oh, that's quite interesting. I actually did not know that. This sound capturing device, however, was used as an ultrasonic submarine detector. It was used in the conjunction with an ultrasound frequency emitter. So you'd use these both together. So together, the devices were used to calculate the distance of an enemy submarine by knowing the amount of time it took the signal from the emitter to travel to the submarine, echo off, and travel back to the microphone. Which, honestly, that's pretty cool technology. And you'll see, the more you study microphones and technology, a lot of these things were invented because we were in war and we needed new technologies to get, ground on the enemies and the countries we were fighting, or whoever, was the big bad at the time in whatever war we were in. And that's always been true. War always increases what we learn and invent, for better or for worse. So yeah, that was in 1917. Now we're going to go to 1923. This is the invention of the moving coil magnetophone. It's worth noting that Ernest Werner von Siemens, the German electrical engineer and inventor, perhaps created the first ever moving coil microphone in 1877. He received a German patent for the electrical mechanical dynamic or moving coil transducer in the same year. In 1924, another type of dynamic microphone, one that works with magnetism, is how they say it, which I can never pronounce either, was born. German scientists Walter Hans Skulke and Dr. Erwin Gerlach co-invented the first ever ribbon microphone. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with what a ribbon microphone is. The idea behind the ribbon microphone was that a fine conductive ribbon could be suspended within a magnetic field and produce an electric signal. as it moved within this field. So, they did just that. They suspended a ribbon made of a very thin aluminum and with a magnetic structure. The ribbon, in this case, acted as the diaphragm, moving in sympathy with the sound waves that hit it. As a conductive ribbons move, it generates an AC voltage, an audio signal. However, it wasn't until the 1930s that strong enough magnets became available to make this ribbon microphone invention practical for audio production. So, in 1924, they came up with the idea of how this would all work, but unfortunately, they didn't have the manufacturing for it, for magnets that were strong enough. But in the 1930s, eventually, they got to that point. And then it goes on to say that in these early years, Harry F. Olson of RCA really propelled ribbon microphone technology forward. Now we're going to go over when some of these microphones became available commercially. So, some of these microphones you couldn't just buy in the commercial world. A lot of them were in government or in the military or very specifically, private industry that kind of kept it to themselves. But the George Newman's CMV3, the bottle, which was the nickname for it, microphone, was the first commercially available condenser microphone. The CMV3, or Condenser Microphone Amplifier 3, released in 1928. Okay, so that was when that one was released. Now we're going to jump forward a little bit. And this is in 1948, the invention of the multi-pattern microphone. So if you're not familiar, microphones have different patterns, and those patterns is how it picks up sound. So there's cardioid, omnioid. There's a ton out there that basically, and you can look up online. And I'll probably put some up on the screen here so you can look at them. The patterns is how it will intake sound, and it's used for a lot of different things. It also helps cancel out frequencies from coming from different directions. This is very helpful when you're playing in a live setting, because if every phone was omnioid or omnidirectional, that would really suck, because then they would pick up everything pretty much in a big radius, and controlling the sound on stage would be a nightmare. But anyways, I digress with that. So the invention of the multi-pattern microphone came about with the creation of the M7, the world's first dual diaphragm condenser capsule. Both these inventions are credited to George Newman and his engineers at George Newman GmbH. The first microphone to feature the MV capsule in multiple polar patterns were the Newman U47 tube condenser microphone. The mic featured an ambidirectional polar pattern, with both sides of the capsule polarized, and a cardioid polar pattern with only the front side of the capsule polarized. So now, after that, we have another jump, and just from in the 40s or late 40s, we have that multi-pattern microphone that was introduced to the world. We now have in 1957, so just under 10 years, schematics for wireless microphones began circulating around in the mid 40s. And working wireless microphones date as far back as 1947. The first noted was by Rex Moore's wireless figure skater microphone. However, the first recorded patent for a wireless microphone only happened in 1957. It was filed by Raymond A. Littke and an American engineer. Littke is historically credited with having invented the wireless microphone. So he gets all that fame for inventing the wireless microphone, which nowadays is very, very needed. I mean, there's so many microphones that we use that are wireless for multiple different reasons. Having a transmitter sent to it is super important. So, moving a couple years after that, in 1959, Ernie Sealer of Shure finalized the first unidirectional top-addressed mic design, and the company released its Model 545 microphone right before the 60s. And then, moving into the 60s, in 1966, Newman GmbH and the NRK, Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation, came together and set the standard 48 V DC phantom power, which was later standardized. So if you've ever used a microphone that requires phantom power of some sort, the standard for that, how much is sent to your microphones, what it requires is 48 volts, 48 volts. And they basically decided that together in the 60s, which is super interesting. So after this period of time, as you can already see, there's a lot we didn't mention here as well. Microphones just go crazy. There's so many inventions of the microphone, variations of each other. A lot of new companies start up as well, and competition gets heavy. So just now that we've kind of gone through some of this, I want to talk a little bit about just some of the microphones that we use a lot in today's world. Excuse me. I'm a big fan of Shure microphones. I've always been a fan of Shure. Obviously, Newman's also great microphones. I love Newman microphones. But right now, I'm speaking on a Shure microphone, right? This is the MV7 XL, meaning that it uses XLRs. There is the Shure MV7 that also takes it takes USB and XLR. It's a little bit more expensive than this microphone because you have to have some kind of mixer. You can't just plug it into a computer or an audio interface. And I'm a huge fan of these Shure microphones. This is very similar to what you would maybe consider be like a smaller, less powerful version of the SM7B. That is a super popular microphone, as I'm sure many of you are aware. That is the microphone that most podcasters use nowadays, including this one as well. A lot of podcasters use the Shure MV7. But Joe Rogan is one of the big names out there that uses the Shure SM7B. And it's used for vocals, for singing. You can also use it for instruments. It just kind of depends what you want to use it for. It's a great microphone. And it has lots of capabilities, and it does a pretty good job at keeping most sound out. It does a good job at raising kind of the mid levels to your voice, makes it sound a little bit more rich. Is probably the best way of saying that. But some other microphones that are super important is the Shure SM7 or SM57 and SM58. So most musicians know what that is, and if you do more of like kind of studio stuff, you might not be as familiar with the SM7, SM57, SM58, but they're dynamic microphones that basically are just they're pretty much the standard what people use because they're very, very durable. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people have like a handful of SM58s using for vocals in a live setting, and the grill's just so freaking, bent and destroyed. They still work. You can drop them, throw them around, jump on them, really. I mean, within reason, obviously, but they will last for years. I know people that have SM58s that they've had for, 30, 40 years or something like that. I mean, that's an exaggeration a little bit, but they've had them for such a long time that they still work great. I mean, they don't look pretty. Usually the biggest thing that gets damaged on those is the grill, so they're all bent and they kind of look a little ugly, but other than that, they're perfect for live vocals. And I mean, basically they work very similar. The only difference really between them is that one has a grill, one doesn't. So the SM57 doesn't have a grill, has a more of a directional pickup for it. You can actually take off the grill to an SM58 and use that almost as an SM57. So, uh, kind of what you would use, the difference you would use them for is, I mean, you can sing into an SM57. It's just not quite as good in the live setting. I mean, it works, but like I said, their technology is pretty much the same. And what I've used those microphones for, obviously SM58s, you're going to use them usually for vocals. You're going to have, your lead singer or backup singers using them unless you have a nicer microphone, and they do just fine. SM57s, though, they're really good for miking up, like a cab for a guitar or your bass player. They're also used a lot of times for miking a kit on a drum. So your toms, sometimes, your floor tom, your high toms, mid toms, snare even. And, that's usually what those are used for. And a lot of kits, when you buy a pack of a drum miking pack, right? Drum mic pack. It comes with 3 SM57s, and then you just mic those toms and the snare, and that's, it works great. But you can also use it for instruments as well. Like if you need a mic, I don't know, a violin, for instance, or used them on cellos before. They work pretty well. And yeah, great microphones. Also, I'm a huge fan of the E609s microphones. Those are great. Those are great for miking cabs. That's kind of what they're meant for, guitar cabs and bass cabs or whatever. You could even do a piano cab or whatever really you need. And you just kind of hang them over your amp, and it just hangs there, and you kind of place it where it needs. A lot of times I will wrap the XLR around the handle of your amp, and those work pretty good. So, and we could talk about microphones for a long, long time because there's always new microphones coming out, and they're always getting better. The technology is getting better, and I'm sure we could do another video on this easily and get more into specifics for each company, exactly when they started, what made each company popular, with what microphone they invented at the time, and what kind of got them going, and what they're kind of known for. Because each company has like the specialties of what they're really good at. I mean, they can do a lot of different things with bigger companies, but they're also specialized in certain things. I mean, even guitar manufacturers are like that. And unless you're Yamaha will make everything. They'll make everything from, pianos to bikes and vehicles, and it's like, okay, they don't know what their genre is. So, anyways, this was just a good introduction to kind of some of the history of the microphone. I hope it was interesting to listen to, and maybe you learned something. If you did, please, consider following this podcast. We release one every Friday, talking about something musically related. I have guests that I meet with as well, and we talk about, many different things. It just kind of depends on what the topic is for that day. So, anyways, I appreciate you guys listening. Until next time, keep rocking on.